Very good evening to you, esteemed viewer. It's a pleasure having you this particular evening. This is Family Hour. This is our Thursday edition where we discuss leadership and governance. Edwin Austin Mukalazi is my name. A lot is happening in the world, but all we can say is that we want to thank the Almighty God for the opportunity to see the beauty of this day and the fact that you are still breathing, the fact that you are able to listen to this voice, to see this image, that's enough to say, thank you, Lord. At least you're better than someone who is lying right there in their casket. So, our only hope is in Jesus Christ. Yeah, is our hope for today, tomorrow, and forever. Therefore, as we think about what has failed, what has not come to pass, let us always remember that at the end of the day, our hope is in the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, today we are discussing governance and accountability. When you talk about accountability, I mean there are a lot of issues raised when it comes to accountability. We hear very many institutions asking for accountability. Then, before you know, there are online campaigns and exhibitions are asking for accountability from particular institutions. So accountability is really a broad thing. But today we want to look at governance and accountability in a leadership perspective. And with us is Dana. Here we are with, she's the Chancellor of the Diocese of Kampala. Dana, it's a pleasure having you this evening.
It's good to be here. It's always a pleasure to be here. Good evening, our viewers, and good evening, Adrian.
Well, we are talking about governance and accountability. Sometimes I feel as if my tongue wants to say government instead of governance. But I mean, we shall limit it to governance and accountability. What comes to your mind when you talk about accountability, especially accountability?
Accountability is a very interesting word, but mostly I think about it in terms of rule of law. Rule of law meaning that no one is above the law. And one of the tenets or the will of the rule of law is what you get accountability from. Accountability means that people are responsible, culpable, answerable, or liable for their work or the things that they are doing. And usually it's a term that is used to, in terms of governance, to bring people to book, where they are answering for their liability, they're answering for their participation, they're answering for how they have spent things. Now, Uganda, I know it has become quite it's synonymous with something that's quite bad. But accountability is not necessarily a bad thing, because accountability is also about stewardship and being a good steward. The Bible tells each of us that to whom is given a trust, they must prove faithful. It goes on to tell us that that there was once a man who gave different talents to different people. To one he gave 5, to one he gave 2, to one he gave 1, depending on which gospel you were reading. And to the one who got 5, he multiplied 5 and got 10 talents. The one who got 2 multiplied and got 2 others. The one who got 1 buried theirs in the sand, or buried theirs. And when the master came back, he said to him, I knew that you were a hard man and that you reap where you do not sow. And so here is the 1 talent that you gave me. And the master said, you unfaithful servant, if you knew I was hard, why didn't you at least put my money in the bank where it could make more money for me, and therefore accumulate interest so that it would be beneficial to me? And it says to the one, it says, get that 1 talent and give it to the one who had multiplied and got 10. And it says, to whom much is given, much is expected. And that's the same way we view accountability. To whom much is given, much is expected. We all have, that scripture tells us that we all will be accountable, but we all have different levels of accountability. You account for the 5 you have given, someone accounts for the 2, someone accounts for the 1. In essence, each of us has been given something to steward in this world, whether it's spiritual or it's physical. But if we're talking about it in terms of governance, each of us has been given us something to steward, and we are answerable now. In terms, you're answerable because there's either an act that requires you to answer, like the Leadership Code Act, that says you must declare your wealth, your property, and where you have got that wealth from. And I think you are very well aware, you saw the president demanding somebody to declare where they had property out of the country or not, because it's required of everybody that's a steward. And stewardship here means that you've been given a trust. You've been given something. You're required to account how you have managed that particular property. If I'm given power today and I'm asked to lead a particular area, I'm going to account for what I did, account for the time I was a leader. That means I account for how the people were, the resources I had, those different things. If you have to audit a business, and that's why it's important that people ask for auditors to audit businesses. Every year, people are required for books of accounts to be passed. They're required to have an auditor. That is accountability. You're answering for the resources that you are being given. If you are given even children to steward over, you're going to account for them. So whether one turns out to be a drunkard, drug addict, or to be a leader in society, an upstanding member in society, you are accounting for it. And I know many times parents say, I did my best, and in truth they did. They did what they knew to do at the time. But you are answerable, because if a child's influences are first affected by home, what is around home. So how they turn out, it's true that their friends can be able to move them away from what they turned, but that says that there is something you missed that you didn't do. And it's a difficult thing to hear, especially if you're a parent, because I know that many parents cry and say, where did I go wrong? What did I do? But sometimes you have done your best, and you need to allow God to do what he can do. So accountability is just equated to being liable for something, equated to being culpable for something, answerable for something, with the expectation at the end that you will give a reason for why your results turned out the way they did.
Okay. Well, you say that accountability is a component of governance. Are there specific principles of good governance, if we can talk about good governance?
I love good governance. It's something I did at certain parts in my career. But yes, there are specific principles of good governance.
Okay.
Accountability is one of them. Responsibility. There are many other things that come under good governance. Now, good governance is really about how you align things to ensure that things are running smoothly. Yeah. I did good governance for a CSO. I think that was our major thing as the CSO, was to come up with ideas of to good governance. And one of the things we had was media, and making media accountable, land transactions, and ensuring that land was actually working well. And those were the two components for us that we worked to create a society where things work, things function, and that everybody's being held to book. The law says this, and you're able to follow the law. And part of what we did in that particular area was to ensure that we were touching on areas that matter in the society. Media is a big component of ensuring that we have good governance, because media keeps people accountable.
Yeah.
Now, not many of us like the media unless it's doing good to us. But you'll always have a good day in media and a bad day in media.
There are people who have deliberately refused to receive us.
No, I don't blame them. And that's not to say media are not my friends. They really are. They are my friends. But you see, the media can keep you accountable. It's the fourth estate in this country. It's counted as the fourth estate. But you know, when you have misinformation, disinformation, it becomes quite difficult for people to like media. And yet sometimes people are changing from being ordinary news outlets into tabloids.
Exactly.
And tabloids are what give the media bad stench.
Yeah.
They give a media bad stench in the eyes of people. But in that sense, I think that having a media that is very accountable and holds people to book and if they're doing the job rightly, that's one of the aspects that you cannot deal away with. You have so many other things in there. You have how people are managing resources, especially when it comes to things like land. Those are things that you need to look into when you are thinking good governance.
Okay. You know, good governance is also something else that we can talk about and talk about and talk about. But we've just talked about the principles. But how can now leaders implement these principles in the various sectors?
That's a very good one. You know, transparency is one of the things that comes out with good governance. Transparency. Nobody wants to be transparent. I think it depends because it has an element of being vulnerable.
Okay.
And none of us want to be vulnerable to an extent where we show weakness.
Yeah.
And yet, transparency is one of the things that make good governance. Yeah. And when you think about it, what governance does is it lays down laws and different areas that people can offer some level of transparency. So when we come to audit your books, we assume that that's a level of transparency. Because in auditing your books, we're assuming you're giving us everything that's supposed to be given to us. But in truth, I once spoke to somebody who likes numbers, and they said numbers will tell you what we want them to tell you. You can make numbers say anything. Yeah. Okay. And I noticed that especially people who know numbers and are good at numbers, they will say what the numbers can tell you anything that they want to say to you. But a person who is willing to open themselves up would know that if I gave the best that I can, and the auditors gave me a good clean book, or they showed me where my weaknesses are, I'm able to improve. And so transparency shows us that there's need for us to open up. And when we do, we can find our weaknesses, we can find our strengths, and find a way to work through. So transparency is a hard thing, but it's a good tenant of good governance. The other is consensus orientation. I think consensus is also something that is not reached at with earlier on when we were having a discussion. I was telling you consensus is quite hard to reach because everybody has their mind, everybody has their thought process. But consensus sometimes is really about either majority, and some people just pull their opinion down to let the majority win. Rarely do you see people come up and say, this is my minority report. Like when we voted homosexuality in the country, there was a minority report from people who said, this is our standpoint and our stand view. But consensus is something that we each must strive to attain. I prefer meetings where we come to a consensus rather than us going to a vote. I learned this from somebody when we first came into leadership at the National Bar then, and we were wondering how to reach a consensus when it came to hiring a top position within a secretariat at the time. And so we got down to the end of the interviews, but every human being has their own agenda. And the panel had its own agenda. Everybody has their agenda. And one of the more mature people on the panel said, I'd rather we did not put this to a vote. Can we arrive at a consensus? Because what consensus does is it says, Edwin, bring your strong point. Diana, bring your strong point. When we all bring our strong point, and we're able to move you into my side, it's not a show of weakness that you have moved. It's a show of understanding and sometimes maturity when you're willing to let your position go for us to arrive at a certain consensus. And so good governance is really about consensus oriented. It's why you will see that when they are electing people, or people try and look for consensus, but more or less when they want to do, when they want to check what the citizens are thinking, they will send people down to check what is the mind of the citizens, because good governance drives towards having a consensus oriented mindset, and that's very key, especially if you're in leadership. If you are at the top of an institution and you want to have a team that is built and a team that continues and a team that is strong, you want consensus from people. You don't want to force people to go a certain direction. Somebody asked me the other day, we were trying to make a decision about where a program should be. And I said to them over time that let's have this program this side. And the reason I gave was more than, yes, we may not have the funds to put it at the desired avenue, but I think so that we make this more available to people and bring it to the center. Let's have it in this way. A week or two later, as we were talking, and I explained to the person why I arrived at that decision, why the event should be held in a particular place as opposed to the original plan. In truth, I had said I'd had a nagging from the Spirit of God that we should change the venue. And she said, why didn't you tell it to me like that? And I said, why should I have to tell it to you in that manner? Because sometimes leadership requires that you convince people beyond your convictions. You may have convictions that you want to sell to people, but the beauty of leadership is you need to inspire and bring them to your position without using a wand or a stick, and sometimes even biblical influence over people, and bring them to that consensus that you want. The other tenet of good governance, which I think is very important for us, is equitable and inclusivity. Equitable in terms of equality and inclusivity, because good governance supposes that everybody comes to the table. And what you want is equality, and you want inclusivity. All of us are different by nature, and our viewpoints are different. Your upbringing is different from my upbringing. And sometimes in life, some people have had a head start compared to other people. I'm sure you've seen on social media, it was popular a few years back, where two people would stand in the beginning line, and somebody would mention and say, if both of your parents are still together, step in front. And some people would stay, another would step in front. If you went to a private school, take another step, and someone would take another step. If you never had to go home because of school fees, someone take a certain step. If you grew up with both parents, take another step. You know, it's different from having both parents alive, but growing up with different parents. And to see that kind of game or kind of message invokes certain reality, invokes certain feelings in all of us. Because you begin to realize that you are privileged. You are privileged or you are disadvantaged. Life is like that. There are many people who are disadvantaged. There are many people who are privileged. When you are in leadership and you speak out of a position of privilege, you're neglecting the fact that there's a people who are disadvantaged. And so when you have the idea that we need to be there has to be equality and inclusivity, is you're leveling the playing field for everyone. You are saying that even if you did not have a chance to have parents in the beginning, there are scholarships for you to go to school. You're leveling the playing field. Diana's parents may pay, someone's parents may not pay. If you are saying this person did not have got to school that far, and they can't continue any further, there's an organization saying we're paying for women, which says gender equality. So they are leveling the playing field. Now, how you look at it matters, because the point of equality is to level the playing field that you and I can compete at the same level. It may not look like that outwardly, but that's what happened. That's what happens when they wanted to bring women into education and they said let's add 1.5 to every woman that joins campus. They are leveling the playing field. That's what they were doing then and there. And so you have more women in professional courses than not. That's what they're doing. So equality or being equipped, equality is to bring to level the playing field. Inclusivity is to bring even those who are minor, marginalized, to be able to come into the decision-making process. And those are words that are thrown around in this day and generation, but they're important for us. Important for us. And so good governance is a process of measuring how public institutions conduct themselves and their affairs and manage their resources. That's what makes that's what brings in the idea of accountability, and accountability is a key part in ensuring that there's good governance.
Okay. There's something you talked about, and that is transparency in accountability. But I mean, now what role does transparency play in promoting accountability and good governance?
Transparency brings everything to light.
Okay.
When you're in a room and you switch on the light, every darkness dissipates, every darkness moves away. Accountability is saying that you are not the sum total. I mean, transparency is saying that you are not the end of everything. Let me tell you, if you gave me 1 billion today and I don't have to account for that 1 billion, I would be happy. Why? Because I can do what Diana wants to do. I don't have to give you, say for example, I went to build. I don't have to follow the rules, because remember that good governance is public institutions conducting public affairs and managing resources and all these things. I don't have to follow the rules, and I don't have to answer to anyone. Imagine the disaster it would create. Imagine the disaster it would create, which I don't want to speak about the recent one that has caused problems in the nation, because it's still painful for many people. But what it does is bring even the most, what do they call them? Even the people who are not willing to show themselves to light. When you bring the way people spend resources, especially money, to light, transparency is saying, show us that expenditure. And in saying telling you to show us that expenditure, you're holding them to account. That if you show us that expenditure, there's either punishment or a reward for how you have spent. Not the way we reward ourselves in different places. But there's a punishment and a reward for how you have spent. And so you are telling everybody that no one is above the law. Hopefully, no one is above the law. Transparency brings things to light. The other thing that transparency does is, as I said, it creates an equitable playing field for you and I. Yeah? Because in being transparent, I'm looking at what you have to become the person you have become, and then what I have, right? So when people can fully analyze what I have and what the other person has, then they can know where to channel resources. Say it this way: why you do the census, and you know some regions have a big populations, have a pure population, where are minerals stipulated, where is their industrial growth, what's the majority of younger people, where is the majority of the workforce. Now all those are important because it's a level of transparency. Hopefully it's a level of transparency.
Like you said, hopefully.
Hopefully, because now I wasn't counted. So hopefully it's a level of transparency, so that they can know if this area has been suffering and their member of parliament has been saying the roads are not working, this is not working, this is not working, then we know how to channel resources better. So the idea of being transparent is to say we're opening up ourselves, perhaps in measurements, so that people can know this is how you better channel resources. There's a road lacking here, there's a hospital lacking here, there's this lacking here. What's this region good at? Some regions are good at sports. How do we promote sports there? Some regions have minerals. How then do we promote the locality? How do they benefit first before everybody else? And so what transparency does is to help you to realign resources where you find there is nothing. But I think critically for individuals is it helps you become a person of integrity. It helps you become a person of integrity. I mean, if I know I'm going to account, I have no choice but to be a person of integrity. And I know that integrity is really your upbringing and it's a characteristic, and we can't beat it into you. But when we put laws that cause people to be transparent, we are forcing or molding you to be a person of integrity. Yeah.
Well, let's say a short commercial break. When we return, we are now going to look at the possible consequences of poor governance, because where there is good, there is also bad. So kindly stick with us.